had this terrible.
Welcome, everybody. You are watching School Psych Podcast. We're really happy to be here tonight. And a great topic. And I think this integrates well with some of the other things that we've been talking about with instruction, and looking forward to getting an idea of where we stand with writing instruction and what we can do better and how we can make changes. So I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca. My name is Rachel. I'm a school psychologist in Maryland, but I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca, who is going to tell you how you can participate if you're watching live tonight. Rebecca.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. I am Rebecca, a school psychologist in the state of Florida, and I hope that you are with us live tonight because I am anticipating a very lively conversation. So if you are, log into your YouTube account and you can comment right alongside this video. If you're watching the video later and not in real time, you can still comment right alongside the video and it will sync up with the timing of the conversation. So we can always go back to that. And we really appreciate your thoughts and contributions to the conversation and discussion. And if you are listening on audio only or at another time, you can message us. Sorry, a word finding issue there. You can message us on either of our Facebook pages, School Psych, your school psychologist, or the School Psych podcast page, which is our dedicated podcast Facebook page. And you can tweet at us at Podcast Psyched on Twitter. And please use the hashtag Psych Podcast because I look for the hashtag in notifications. And we look forward to hearing from you wherever you feel like chatting with us. And now I'm going to hand it over to Eric, who is going to introduce our wonderful guest.
Thank you, Rebecca. My name's Eric, and I am a school psychologist in Connecticut. And we are excited to have Dr. Karen Harris with us this evening. Literacy, the importance of literacy is a topic that's huge for all of us in education and in school psychology, one that we are constantly trying to assess and support in numerous ways. And so really understanding research behind literacy. And we talk a lot about reading. We don't talk a lot about writing. So we're excited to have Dr. Harris with us. And Dr. Karen Harris is Arizona State University Regents Professor Emeritus and former Mary Emily Warner Endowed Professor of Education. She has worked in education for over 40 years across this amazing country of ours, from rural to urban settings, Midwestern settings. She has worked in all of them, and her research focuses on validating instructional approaches derived from integrating multiple theoretical views and evidence-based practices, as well as developing effective professional development for these approaches. She's developed the self-regulatory strategy development, known as SRSD model for strategies of instruction, which is evidence-based and has some really great research behind it. So I've been able to read a little bit about this, but I'm excited to hear from her what this is about. And so welcome, Dr. Harris. And perhaps we could start just talking about the state of literacy and writing in the country right now.
Right. Certainly. I mean, you know, and all of your listeners know, either live or later, what the state of reading progress and success is in this country. It's deeply concerning. What a lot of people don't realize is that writing is no better off. If anything, it's even a bit worse off than what we see in reading. There continues to be this false assumption that if you can read, you should be able to write. This underlying assumption, whether it's held by teachers or by parents or anyone else in the family or system of education, has really hurt us. Students don't learn to write naturally. So let's just look a little bit at where are we. Right now, the most recent NAEP data in writing showed us that only 27% of our 12th and 8th grade students scored at or above proficient. That means the large majority of our 8th and 12th grade students scored below proficient. And in fact, 20% of our 8th and 12th grade students scored below basic. The ACT, the College and Career Readiness Test that so many students take, just came out with a report recently, and on this test, only 53% of our students met readiness standards in English. That includes reading and writing, using the two together. Furthermore, on both of these tests, these numbers are far lower for students of color and for all students living in poverty, white and students of color. So we are looking at a national issue here in writing that equals the issue that most people know about in reading. You want to know a little bit about kind of what may have led us to this point? I'm not sure. You tell me what next.
Yes, I think that would be great. Backstage, we were all talking about some of the science of reading and certainly the Sold a Story podcast. Yes, talk to us about how we've gotten away from the mark.
Sure. Well, and those who've listened to Sold a Story, which is excellent, you know how this has happened in reading. And there are some parallels and some differences in writing. I love many aspects of Writer's Workshop, and I need to say that first and foremost. But unfortunately, I call them Pied Pipers. For the last few decades, we have had people telling us in the name of whole language, in the name of Writer's Workshop, that students will come to learn all they know about good writing by trying to write and by reading. And neither of those works. Writing is difficult and complex. And I have put a set of resources for more information about writing and more information about SRSD into a folder that you all have available for your participants. And you can get a lot more details there. There are videos, there are articles, and there's a lot more information about where you can learn about SRSD, which we'll talk about in a minute. But these people themselves were sold a bill of goods. A teacher recently wrote a really good article talking about how she and her colleagues, we bought into this Writer's Workshop belief. We really believed in it, and we thought we were being morally strong for our students by upholding it, and that this was the right way to go about engaging in social justice. And yet what we actually have in the data is that our students are not performing nearly adequate for work or for college. And in our grades K through 12, they are being left on their own devices far too often to figure out how to write. And those who do, I think we have totally neglected the role of the family, the parents, and the community. When students do excel in a whole language classroom, our daughter, now she's 36 now, but our daughter was in a whole language classroom for kindergarten and first grade, and the school was pretty much Writer's Workshop, Reader's Workshop across K6. At the end of kindergarten, they said, oh, I think this child, your daughter, is at risk in reading and needs an assessment and might be have a learning disability. And we went, okay, well, at the time we were both LD specialists and we didn't see that, but we knew that there was inattention and hyperactivity. And we had the assessment done, and we didn't say anything to the assessor except the school wanted it, just get a free and unbiased assessment. And at the end of it, she looked at us and she said, everything's intact. By any chance, is your child going to a Writers and Readers Workshop school? And we said yes. And she said, well, you're both former teachers. You probably know what to do. So over that summer, we continued to do everything we'd been doing with her in reading. A lot of reading to her, with her, a lot of fun games and activities. But to that, we added more explicit reading development. We added word wheels. We added Bob books, which I absolutely love. We did more of the finger underlining and started encouraging her to read out loud along with us. By the beginning of first grade, she entered reading at a second grade level. So that kind of thing, or parents who can afford tutors, right, who don't know how to do it themselves, that kind of thing is not being addressed in any of this research base. So We know that we need to move beyond that, but there are so many good things about Writers Workshop that I don't want to give up. We have written about this, and I have written about this since the 1980s. The development of SRSD began in the 1980s, self-regulated strategy development, and it was done by combining across theories, not one single theory. Whole language, Writers Workshop, Readers Workshop, they're generally based on social cultural theory or one or two other theories, and they don't look at the results of research closely across the 12 or 15 different theories of learning we now have. I looked at all of them and I took from every single theory, and it took a couple years to build this. I took from every single theory what we knew worked. And I'll get into all the components of SRSD a little bit later, but I wasn't blinded by pledging allegiance to one single theory. And when you take all the evidence we have about how children learn, it's really powerful. So instead of Pied Pipers, instead of using a single base to look at instruction, I looked at all of what we know about powerful teaching and about learning.
That's great. And I've been reading, you've sent me some articles, and we'll post a link to some of those abstracts and whatnot, and been reading on writing. And I know that, you have some like myths of what just our misconceptions and things, and you talk about kind of these paradigm wars, and I love what you're saying about pledging allegiance to a particular theory and kind of being narrowly based. And I see that sometimes within the science of reading movement, that some people are like very like it has to be this particular thing and you cannot deviate, when even though there might be research over here that says that this other thing kind of works. So I'm really interested in for you to tell us a little bit more about the components of SRSD and what are evidence-based strategies and things to look for. Oh, my other question, sorry, I have so many.
Okay, go ahead.
When you're talking about Writers Workshop, that's regarding Lucy Calkins then, or is that more broad?
Lucy Calkins is one example, and while she has cited our work and other people's work recently and made some changes to her curriculum, it is nowhere near sufficient for the needs of most learners. In fact, the only version of Writers Workshop that shows significant and slightly meaningful effects on students' development as writers is the National Writing Project, and they use a lot of Lucy Calkins' work. But that National Writing Project research shows, there's only a little bit of research on it, but there's a large-scale study, and it shows only small effect sizes in change in students' writing. So even though it's done really, really well when National Writing Project does it, it's still not sufficient. Now, decades ago, Donald Graves in an interview, and let me just stop for a second and say, in addition, there's an article out that just came out in Theory into Practice. And a lot of this information and more detail on it is available in that article. And I know that you all have a link to free downloads. The publisher grants 50 free downloads, and that link will come up. And you can, anyone right now or later can go to that link, and until 50 are gone, it'll be live. And in that article, in Theory and Practice, I talk about an interview with Don Graves late in his career, and he was deeply concerned about some of what was happening with Writers Workshop, including the work that he collaborated on with Lucy Calkins, and other people did as well. One of the things he said that I think is so telling is that he's been so happy to see so much more writing going on in classrooms, but it's not better writing. Donald Graves said, the father of Writers Workshop, the process approach, we're not getting better writing. And one of the things he also said was, we can't do it all in conferences. And I agree, and you can't do it all in many lessons either. SRSD and Writers Workshop can be beautifully integrated. And as I go through the components of SRSD, you can think about what you know about Writers Workshop and how would you fit that in? One of the biggest things that has to be done is hit the pause button on mini lessons. Instead, have SRSD lessons for the whole class. If you have students who are way ahead, you won't teach them what you're teaching other students. You have to differentiate. That's one of the key characteristics of SRSD. And I want to say that people shouldn't feel badly about not knowing much about SRSD. One of the other huge issues we face is there is little to no teacher preparation in teaching writing, not in colleges of education, not in school psychology. We and others have done national surveys, and now there are international surveys. Most teachers report getting either no class at all in how to teach writing or 1 to 2 class sessions in a course on reading. You can't cover how to teach writing in that short period of time. So every college in the US needs to jump on board teacher preparation in writing, every university. Parents need to demand it, schools need to demand it. So that said, let's talk about what is SRSD. Well, it's a bit of everything we know that works, as I've already said. So it's very active learning. People hear SRSD is explicit. Yes, it is. We don't believe, as Michael Presley used to say, we don't believe in keeping secrets from children. If we know what makes a good persuasive essay, you should know what makes a good persuasive essay. That's how I talk with my students. And I still teach it myself as well as work in research projects. So it is explicit, but it is discourse based. It's full of dialogue and discussion. We develop a great deal of academic vocabulary. What's the difference between a fact and an opinion? We start with that in our first and second grade work. What does it mean to state your opinion? What does it mean to persuade a reader? What's different about persuading than just stating your opinion? What does it mean to inform or explain? We go through and we develop so much of this academic language around writing. I can't even get into all of it right now. It is also, this is hard to explain in a brief period of time. But SRSD doesn't just include explicit instruction on what this means to write to persuade or to give your opinion or to inform or to narrate or tell a story or write an autobiography. It gets into what it is to self-regulate. Self-regulate yourself, a little redundant, right? But what it is to self-regulate while you are writing. And self-regulation breaks down into 4 really critical skills. Self-talk. Now, this is similar to mindfulness. It's similar to many other things we hear about self-efficacy. It builds self-efficacy. It helps change attitudes. But we sit down, let's start with self-talk. We sit down with our kids and at every grade level. It's a little harder with the older kids. And when we talk about self-talk with older kids, we're talking about in your head, not out loud. Little kids, especially grades 1 and 2, do some of their self-talk still out loud and some in their head. And that's okay. We shouldn't discourage that out loud talk when it happens. It's developmentally natural. So we talk about, well, when the teacher says we're going to have writing, what's the first thing that runs through your head? Now, by 3rd grade, we're getting up. The majority of the things students say are negative. I don't like to write. I don't want to write. I hate writing. I was born a bad writer and no one can ever do anything about it. That's what one student said to me. And we accept that. This is how you feel. How do you think it helps you when you sit down to write if you're thinking these things? Well, I just quit, or I don't want to do it, so I don't try hard. Okay. Now, what if we changed how we thought? What if I told you that I have some tricks with little kids? We call them tricks that good writers use, 1st grade, 2nd grade. But as students get older, we call them strategies. I have some strategies that you can learn that good writers use. If I promise to work really hard to learn them, and you promise, I promise to work really hard to teach them, and you promise to work really hard to learn them, then I know that you will get better and better at writing. No one's perfect. And if, with young students, you're just starting. And so if you will agree, then I will teach you these strategies or tricks, and we'll keep track of your progress and we'll see how you're getting better. So right away, we're building the belief that there's not something wrong with me. that in fact, I just need to be taught, but I also have to put forth the effort. You have to agree to put forth the effort to learn this. If you're not in there putting forth effort, it won't work. So our self-talk focuses around controlling what you're thinking about what you know, telling yourself how to use what you know, how to use your strategies. So self-talk is, and that's only part of it, there's more, but self-talk is the first self-regulation strategy. Goal setting is the second. We have literally known for decades that setting explicit goals that are attainable in a reasonable amount of time, while at the same time acknowledging further away goals that we'll get to over time, and then tracking progress on those goals, especially tracking your own progress, is extremely powerful in learning. Kids set goals. They set goals for content. They set goals for style. They set goals for reaching the reader. We have so many different kinds of goals that teachers and students can choose among, but they always include goals for including all the aspects of this genre, addressing each part of your writing assignment, and so on. So we goal set, and then there's that self-assessment of your performance, and that's the next form of self-regulation. Students, the littlest kids, we use fun graphs. We might use ice cream cones. We might use rockets. When you fill the rocket up, you color in the flames and you blast off. But they're graphing how many of the genre parts do they include. They're coloring stars for how many good transition words or good hook the reader openings they used, or for how many good ways they wrapped up their essay. I mean, it goes on and on. It's very flexible and it's very differentiable for students. And for teachers, this focus on student self-assessment, they keep it in a folder and they do it every time they write and they celebrate their progress. This focus on self-assessment takes some of the burden off teachers so that the kids are assessing, the teachers going around seeing how they're doing it. Peers can trade papers and assess each other as well. That's up to the teacher, but self-assessment is good first. And then we have self-reinforcement. So that third one is called self-monitoring or self-assessment, and the fourth one is self-reinforcement. Now this happens naturally. We don't generally have to prompt it or teach it. When students look at their progress and we ask them what they're thinking, or just spontaneously out, they start going, look at me, I blasted off my rocket. Or older kids, this works through 12th grade. There's less data in high school, but there is data in high school and more studies far more than there used to be. They use bar charts or they use polygraph, they use dot to dot graphing. So we certainly take a different approach at high school. But those four forms of self-regulation, we have again known for decades that they matter. Not just goal setting, but all of them. So there's four forms of self-regulation. In addition, peer collaboration is hugely important. Listen to my scientific talk. Hugely important. Peer collaboration is another social emotional learning ability as well, and so is self-regulation. But peer collaboration leads to that back and forth give and take. We teach peer collaboration strategies while planning, while writing together, while assessing. We use peer collaboration activities throughout the writing process, and teachers are in charge. They decide what to use with who and when, right? SRSD is not a scripted curriculum. It's just not. We'll provide you with example lesson plans. We'll provide you with descriptions of what teachers have done and how it's worked for them, but you have to create your own plans, but you have to include all the parts. Okay. Now, going back to that self-regulation, one of the first things all teachers want to leave out is self-talk. I don't really need to do it. It probably doesn't matter that much. And another thing they're interested in leaving out is the graphing. Well, guess what? Young children and even high school students tell us are the two things they got perhaps the most out of and their favorites: learning how to be positive in their head and use their strategies, tell themselves how to get through the strategy, and they love graphing in any form. So those are among two of their favorites. So I'm really big with telling teachers, no, you can't leave those out. Later on, if it doesn't work for you at all, and then after having tried it, you alter it or you take it out altogether, that's your call. In addition, we work on self-efficacy, the concept that I can be a good writer. I can develop as a writer. And in fact, research shows with SRSD that motivation goes up for students, self-efficacy goes up for students, attitudes and beliefs about writing and themselves as a writer improve for our students. So we know we're making a difference there. Yeah, what else can I tell you about what is SRSD? Oh my gosh.
Well, you're
That
gathering
probably
your
covers a lot of it. Sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
That's okay. While you're gathering your thoughts, I just wanted to jump in and just, share this impression that I have that as I read some of the articles that we shared in the last few days over email, and in one of them, the researcher, the teacher wanted to take out that self-talk piece, right? And I think maybe because teachers often feel like, well, we do that. That's a natural part of all lesson planning. And so we don't need to have it like in the study. And then the researcher really insisted, no, that's so important. And it just strikes me that, it's kind of like one of those moments where you're like, of course it's so important, but you don't really think about it until it's all, proven.
Right.
But because as little kids are looking at books with illustrations and, printed with the author's name in bolded letters, and then the teacher is calling that, saying, okay, writers, we're going to be writers today. It just makes sense to me that there would be a lot of worry and cognitive dissonance. Like, I'm not a writer. I never wrote anything. I didn't write a book, right?
You bring up two really important points. Modeling is key to students learning to use self-talk or self-instructions or whatever other word term for it you want to use. Modeling is key to students learning to do that. And with the modeling, teachers have to model differently than they're used to doing. They can't just say, well, first I'll do this and then I'll do this. Instead, they have to say, all right, I have to write. Take a deep breath. I can do this. I have a strategy for this. I know the trick. And what they're doing is they're doing cognitive and affective modeling, not just step-by-step modeling. Furthermore, in SRSD, modeling is not, SRSD is never stand and deliver. Explicit does not mean stand and deliver. And modeling in SRSD is not a one-way street. It's not just watch me. It's interact with me. Okay, I've learned a strategy. Oh, what's my first step? Guys, can you help me? I need one reason why I think soccer is the best sport ever. Who has a good idea? Help me. So there's a lot of interaction back and forth, but the teacher is totally in control. The teacher makes sure that everything she or he wants modeled is modeled, and this modeling may need to be repeated for the whole class a couple times or for individuals or small groups additional times. But modeling is one of the huge components. I want to go back to, okay, kids, now you're right. One of my favorite examples, and I dearly love this teacher, but I visited her classroom and they were reading I Want a Iguana. I also love that book. The kid is writing the book to convince the parents that I should get to have an iguana. And the kid has really good reasons that'll help me learn to be responsible and so forth and so on. And then the teacher says, now you all write an essay. I want you to write to your parents, to write to your parents or to write to someone you choose. So you've got someone you're really thinking of as your reader. And I want you to convince them of the animal you most want to own. Whoa, I'm sorry. I'm 6, 7, 8. I'm 15. I just read a beautiful essay about so-and-so. I can't write like that. And I Want an Iguana is too far away of a model for kids to use. It's not wrong to read it, teach it, and talk about it. Academic vocabulary. What did the writer do well to persuade the parents? Once you've learned the strategy, what do you see as how the writer uses emotion, how the writer uses appeals to something like responsibility? What do you think of that? So there's all this rich discussion, but then you don't say, now you write. about the pet you want. Instead, now you teach a persuasive writing strategy appropriate to the age and grade. For little kids, we use a strategy called TREE. I won't go through it now, but it represents the main parts of a persuasive essay. A good topic sentence, hook the readers, bring them in, at least 3 really good reasons, give more detail about each reason, and at least 3, that's a minimum. We want more if you can come up with them. And then a really good ending that wraps it up right and hits the reader strong and refocuses the reader on all your reasons. So once you learn that, when you're in first grade, second, and we're doing it with first grade up, when you're in first grade, second grade, and the strategy gets more sophisticated across the grades. It doesn't stay the same. And it changes names as kids get older too. In high school, we teach C-SPACE, which is a far more sophisticated narrative strategy. But when kids know that strategy, now, okay, you write to persuade. You're no longer trying to write a book like I Want a Iguana. But there's a second key here. We use nearby models for kids. I Want a Iguana is a way out there model. They're not going to write that book, not in the elementary grades. They need models of what a first grader should be able to do, which is a whole lot different than a second grader, which is a whole lot different than a third grader. And we create those models. We use kids' own writing after they've learned the strategies, and sometimes we write them ourselves. And we make them available. You don't have to go create all your own. We try to make stuff available as freely as possible. This is not a commercial curriculum. And again, it's not scripted. And so kids read these models that look like what they'll be able to write. It might be this long in first grade. Our first graders often do something like, "Dear Mom, I want a frog." And they don't even maybe get 3 reasons. In fact, in first grade, we back off the minimum of 3. It's 1, 2, or 3, whatever works for you. And over time, you can learn to add more. But if you can get 1 really good reason, then you can think about adding a second one. So we work that way, and a good ending. And it's much more demanding by second grade. We want those 3. And some kids, if they're ready for it, we want them adding details. And then by 4th grade, it's the full ball of wax with TREE. And they're reading these models, short ones at first grade that first graders are actually doing after instruction, longer ones at second grade, more complicated and longer, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and so on. So they've got all of this to help focus them. Now, not only do they read those good models, but years ago, one of my team members, Dr. Karen Sandmel, said, kids love negative models. They love to see other people do things wrong, catch them being wrong, and a lot can be learned from negative models. And I went, how have I gone 20 years without thinking of adding that? She's absolutely right. So we also mess up some stories. I woke up early in the morning and the moon was out, the stars were out, and it was pitch dark outside. What's wrong with that? And the story goes on, and there's all these little errors. One of the things kids love is we have one about picking your own pet, and a kid wants to pick a cat. And a really good thing about a cat is you can take it for a walk, and then you get exercise. And they crack up at that one in 2nd and 3rd grade. What are they thinking? So we rewrite those with our class. We take the good parts that are working, we put them in, we use graphic organizers, and we do not use webs all over the place. We use structured graphic organizers. What am I thinking about for my opening? My first reason. And we teach really, really hard to make notes. It's so hard in 1st and 2nd grade and into 3rd grade to learn to make notes. So we spend a lot of time on that. Because if you're writing out full sentences and then putting the end at the end, and that's your planning sheet, you haven't planned. And a good plan is the plan plus more. We call it write and say more. You have your plan, but what else can you think about while you're writing? Anyways, all of that goes into SRSD. So Rebecca, I just wanted to add those two things.
I love it. It just feels to me like a great sort of model for anything, math. I think it could be so important, that self-talk. And I wish you had been with me last week when I was writing a research paper, because I think you could have.
Well, in fact, Rebecca, There is now a large body of research on SRSD and math. Fractions is a big area. Writing to learn fractions and express what you know is part of that fraction work, but that's only one small part of it. There's a big body of, a growing body of research on SRSD for social studies, for science. In fact, our first and second grade work is with science. So SRSD was not developed for writing. Thank you for bringing that up. When I was developing it as a model of instruction, it was for anything that's hard to learn. And then I met Steve Graham, who some people know and some don't, is my husband. And I married him. And I say SRSD for writing got born because we put our expertise together, and that's where we started our research. So we used my instructional model. I learned a lot from him. He learned from me. Now we both go back and forth between both worlds quite freely. But at the time, he knew a lot more about what each genre demanded. He knew a lot more about progressive development, and he was involved in creating all of our strategies. Sometimes I took a lead, sometimes he took a lead. So it is not surprising to me, but I have to tell you guys, the first study was published in 1985. Okay, and look how many decades it's taken to even for SRSD to become an evidence-based practice, and now for it to be starting to be used in other areas. Thank you, Rebecca.
One of the things that I hear a lot, Karen, is from teachers is, the pace of the curriculum and so many pieces that they have to juggle. And I think for anything to be done well, to teach to mastery and to help our struggling learners, we have to put time into this. What can we do to support teachers in juggling good writing, teaching, and good literacy practices?
Yep. That paper that can be downloaded, or you can also just get it from your library, and the reference is there. And once the paper is no longer available for free download, your library should be able to get it through you from interlibrary loan. So there's a lot more about that in here, about what are the barriers? Why is it so hard to get SRSD scaled up in schools? And Eric, you just put your finger on one of the big ones. I hate pacing calendars. I'm sorry. It's over control of the curriculum in my mind. And also it forces a teacher through a buffet of learning rather than a deep intake of learning. For example, one commonly used commercial curriculum right now has over 40 forms of writing taught in 4th and 5th grade. I mean, there's 4 forms of poetry, there's business letters, it just goes on and on and on. We need to privilege in school and get off pacing calendars for commercial curriculums. We need to get off that. They have their place. They can be helpful to us, commercial curriculums. I participate in some of them, trying to get as much evidence-based practices or EBPs in there as I can, and as much of SRSD in there as I can. But we have to have a re-look, a re-examination at what we're doing. Commercial curriculums aren't based largely on evidence-based practices, although they try. So as we explained in the article, commercial curriculums have to sell, and they write their curriculums to meet the demands of state curriculum committees. And if a state curriculum committee says you will learn these 30 forms in 3rd grade and 40, they have to put them in there. We have to, as parents, as teachers, as school psychologists, as administrators, we have to advocate for control over the calendar for literacy instruction and math instruction and science and social studies. We have to do less. We have to key it to what matters most, especially in these early grades, and then we can expand from there. But until our students can write in the 3 big genres, and narrative is just as important, until they can write in the big 3, until they can read in the big 3, and our research in the last decade or more now has been on reading, marking up text, close reading for writing across all 3 of those genres. And it's working beautifully. It aids reading comprehension and it aids writing. And reading and writing have a synergistic relationship. And we do need to do more, and teachers are working hard at this, to combine them in our instruction and in our classes and across content areas. So pacing calendars are one big barrier. The others are things I've already talked about. The whole, I can only do whole language and it has to be pure. I was on a phone conference with a school superintendent recently, and he said to me and to the group, you know, if I told my teachers that they had to change their writer's workshop and they had to include SRSD and handwriting and spelling, which by the way they should, I'd have a revolt on my hands. Okay, then let's face up to the revolts. But let's show teachers and let's provide them with the professional development that's needed, how this can work and how they don't have to give up the best of what they're doing in Writer's Workshop. Every Writer's Workshop teacher I've talked to, and you asked about Calkins. We have been in Calkins school after Calkins school. Much of our research in the early years, the 90s and 2000s, was done in schools that had invested heavily in the Calkins program. And so we need to acknowledge from the beginning, you need to, SRSD is not teacher free. SRSD is hugely reliant, there you go again, hugely reliant on teacher knowledge and teacher decision making and what teachers bring to that instruction. And many teachers are already doing many of the parts of SRSD. It's a matter of learning maybe how to take them further, spend more time on them. And SRSD progresses through 6 stages of instruction. It's part of it that I haven't mentioned yet. And those stages need to be given the time students need until they have at least initial mastery or competence in that genre. And our most recent research does integrate SRSD, aspects of Writer's Workshop, building a community. You've heard me all through here. Community building doesn't belong just to Writer's Workshop, nor does social justice belong just to Writer's Workshop. Social justice is when children thrive. When we help children thrive, we create social justice. And so we need teachers to understand and come on board and not feel like they should throw away everything they're doing that's working for them. Nearly all the teachers I talk to say, yeah, it's working for some of my kids, but boy, as a school, we're not meeting standards. As a classroom, too many of my kids aren't getting it. Some aren't getting it at all. I have behavior problems during my writing time, and on and on. So we have identified many more barriers in that article, which people can read. But I think you have hit on a couple of the biggest ones here.
I'm wondering if, you know, as school psychologists, yes, I wish that we had more control over the curriculum. And like you said, it starts kind of, you know, from the state level, and then, you know, the districts are purchasing these curriculums, and they've put millions of dollars into them, and so they're going to follow them. And so we are often, you know, not consulted in any capacity. I wish we were. In cases where maybe we have a teacher that's looking to supplement, to do a little bit more, or maybe even parents at home, you know, I'm kind of thinking of myself too. I know that my children are receiving 20 minutes of writing a day, and it's a little bit haphazard and kind of all over the place. And I know, you know, and that's not on the teacher. I know that what the curriculum we're dealing with. What are there things that can be done in light of that to make a little bit of a difference? And if so, like where? Yeah.
Absolutely. First of all, we've talked about pacing and time. That 20-minute limit, I know that's not uncommon. And I know those curriculums, you know, the teacher goes to this page, does what it says on this page, and 20 minutes is over, and the next day they go to this. And that's part of what Writer's Workshop teachers reject, that rigid curriculum that doesn't allow them enough time to do what most needs to be done. So we're together on that. So no, you can read, Steve Graham has a really good paper out on changing writing instruction, what we need to do to change writing instruction. And we're talking 45 minutes or more in the early grades, and longer in the, sorry, my earbud's falling out, and longer in the upper grades. So we also desperately need to create home family partnerships in writing. Think about what the reading field has done to get parents to read to their kids at home, to get parents to understand how to read to their kids at home, how to scaffold that shift toward, okay, I'm reading, you read with me, you read. We need to do that in writing, and I know some outstanding teachers who are doing it beautifully. The teachers who have, for example, the teacher who did SRSD professional development, we use what's called practice-based professional development, which again is not stand and deliver. It's interactive and collaborative, and it's great. And like SRSD in the classroom, it's joyful, and at times it's fun, and at times it's hard. So with that, what she did is she's created these many different activities that students take home to their parents, like show them a little sheet, even like at second grade. Today we learned about topic sentences. Go home and explain what you know about topic sentences to someone in your family. And have them sign that they learned about topic sentences and bring that back. And we'll talk and we'll share what some of you heard from the people you taught this. When they're learning a whole strategy, we've had the teacher go home, that teacher has sent home, sorry, it's not my idea, this was hers. Okay, you go home and tell your parent now the strategy you've learned to write to inform, or to write to persuade, or to tell a story, okay, personal narrative. And then come back and tell us have your parents sign it, and then come back and we'll talk about what your parents think about what you're learning. We've gotten some, in our own work, we've gotten some incredible comments from parents. We had one parent who actually broke down in a parent-teacher conference, started crying because she was shown writing and by her son. And she said, the parent looked at it and then said, this isn't my son's writing. He can't write like this. And when the teacher assured her that it was her son's writing, that's when she started crying. And that teacher did a wonderful thing, but we should be sharing this writing and this progress sooner. Now, teachers are often afraid to send home the plan, my writing plan, before I do my writing, and get parents to maybe help you think about your planning even a little bit more, or send home a first draft that you're getting ready to revise. We have revising strategies. We have strategies that cover the whole writing process. So then make copies and send the copies home, because I know with my own fourth graders, and certainly my kindergartners, if I send something home, it wasn't highly likely to come back. So we can work around that. Also, a wonderful, wonderful woman I've worked with and co-author of our book, Powerful Writing Strategies for All Students, Barbara Danoff. I've worked with her for 40 years. She did parent workshops. Not all parents came. She didn't care how many came. It only mattered that some came. And when word got out that the parents were actually learning how to help their kids at home with strategies and self-regulation and how to plan and how to do some of their planning at home, more parents came. So we need to empower parents with some of the knowledge. We are not talking about making them responsible for teaching writing. Let's be totally straightforward about that. No, that is not on their hands. But they are partners with us. Some of the most powerful partnerships we can have are with parents. And so we need them to know how they can help their child at home. I'm not big on, in the very early grades, on sending home a writing assignment and telling the parents the kid needs to do this themselves. A colleague of mine called me one time and he said, my fifth grader has to write a biography of so-and-so. And my kid would rather set his hair on fire than write. Those are his exact words. And he said, can you help me? He used our book, and I'm not trying to sell our book to you. Yes, we have one book. It's getting old. A new book is in the works now. It'll be all new strategies. But the strategies in the book that came out quite a while ago, they're all still current and they're all still working. But he used the strategy in there for narrative writing. And the student wrote the autobiography, learned the self-talk. The parent was able to follow through on all of it. Another thing Dr. Leslie Rogers did, she had parents of middle school students and early high school students get together and swap kids and it worked beautifully because by that age, they don't want to learn from their own parent. When my daughter was doing college applications, I said, I can give you some information about what colleges look for. And she goes, how would you know? Okay, end of discussion. So what we do there, what she did there, the parents got the same learning, and these parents were eager to do it because their kids were having so much trouble with writing. And then they taught somebody else's kid. And there's research data from that. That was a study. And the parents did a wonderful job. Now, should parents have to do that? No. We taught our daughter how to read. Parents do help. And when they want to help, we need to make that possible. And when they don't know that they can help, we need to help them see how they can help. So I don't know if I answered the whole question, but that's part of it, I think.
That's great. And I love that all these things and researchers are so awesome that they want to get this out to people. Like you said, you're not looking to sell things and live in a huge mansion and drive your yacht into the sunset.
No.
You're looking to help children. And
no.
so
and our profits from the book, I'm sorry, Rachel, but I forgot to say, our profits from the book go to family charities, shelters. I have never in my life before 2010 never had homeless children in high numbers in the schools that I work in. And now we have homeless children frequently in our teacher instructional groups or where we're still getting ready for teachers to learn it, in our SRSD professionals are teaching it. And it breaks my heart. And so right now our profits have always gone to charities, and right now and I wish they were more, but hey, you might make more money on a textbook, but a book for teachers, the royalties you aren't given a huge amount of royalties. I mean, it's not like what you can make off selling a curriculum or something like that. I have resisted, and most SRSD researchers have resisted turning SRSD into a commercial curriculum, because so far there's no curriculum company that just wants to publish SRSD. They want to embed it in their structured 20, 30-minute lessons, 3 times a week. And that's just not okay with us. So there is also a book out for high school. This is all in the resource list that's in the folder that you all provide. So your participants can easily access all this information. I'm sorry, Rachel.
No, that's great. That's awesome. And so when you're referencing the resources like examples like a first grader, how you would write this and whatnot, is that all also like on the website? How do people find those type of things?
Right, the whole set of materials, right? The book doesn't have all of that in it because of page restrictions. The book we're working on now, all of that will be online so that you can get all the student materials and all the teaching materials online. And you can get, as in the book, we give descriptions of how a teacher might have taught it. We give narrative lesson plans that say, okay, so the teacher said, or the teacher might say, or you need to consider, but it's not a lesson plan you can follow. It's several pages long, so you understand what you're trying to do at each step. And it's recursive. Sometimes you have to back up. Sometimes you have to pull a small group and redo things that other kids have already got. You have to do a lot of that differentiating. So it can't be scripted. It just cannot be and be done well. It's up to the teacher to bring their knowledge of the student, and now their knowledge of writing and their knowledge of good community and their knowledge of Writer's Workshop into this integration with SRSD and with spelling, handwriting, vocabulary, and sentence construction.
It's beautiful. It's a lovely thing. And I know we're running short on time, but I did want to, point out that when I was reading some of the articles on SRSD where you're comparing, there was one that you sent that it was, a 10-week study, and I was seeing these effect sizes, and I was reading this article. My husband was next to me, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like screeching out because I'm looking, I have, I think in there it was like 1.3 something, and then I saw on the website too 1.59, and I just like my nerd brain was just firing off with how amazing. I don't see effect sizes like that. So can you talk a little bit about, like, were you surprised at that? Was that not surprising? That must have been exciting.
It was exciting and it was happy, but it was what I expected because of the power of combining across theories, meta theory or integrative theory, whatever you want to call it. Because when you do that and you take everything we know, now you've got, that curve, which isn't really a perfect bell. It's got spikes all over, but effect sizes that are small, the middle of the curve, and then everybody else from below and above the middle moves up, about that much. So it's not very much. A moderate effect size, you see that mean score move up much more, and this is on the scale of the instrument. So that's, that's a pretty big move. That's much more meaningful than that small move. But with a large effect size, you're seeing something like this. So the mean started over here, and now the mean's way up here. And that's where you get those 1 point over 1. These scores over 1 or close to 1. And in fact, the research does show effect sizes for SRSD across studies, across variables, I won't get into all of them, run from average from 0.78 to 2.03. So, and these are effect sizes for all kinds of things like vocabulary, quality, elements, holistic scoring. So it's our first and second graders. I'll just close by saying we taught them to read science text. We wrote it, and we'll give it to people once this is ready to share and it's close. We aligned with the next generation science standards. We wrote text on the topic of the planet or plants and animals, depending on the grade level. And we did all of the instruction, and we taught them to mark up the text, to find all the parts that they might use or build from in their plan. Then they make a plan, and then they write. And the effect sizes are up there, Rachel. They're in that 0.7 to 2. And it's so exciting. Now, that doesn't mean that suddenly everybody's writing on grade level, right? Now, I know we're not supposed to use the word struggling, but I will not turn my back on these kids who are 2 and 3 grade levels below. I'll use whatever language people decide is acceptable, but it is never meant to be derogatory. It is not a label. It is not negative. It is a cry for help. We, in this word term is used a lot in special ed, and no one in special ed misunderstands it. It means if we don't help this kid, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. And those kids are on a fast track to delinquency and failure at work and negative life outcomes. So we use that term with heart. But our first and second graders, man, even the first graders could get a topic sentence and one thing to know about the earth, and maybe not so many endings, but at least a second thing for most. And our second graders, most of them were hitting 2 and 3 big ideas about, oh my gosh, photosynthesis, and a topic sentence and an ending. And it was just blew us away. So there's this whole argument, should we teach skills first and then we can teach composition? No. Our kids are capable of learning them together because their handwriting and their spelling and their sentence construction and their oral language went up too. I know we're out of time.
No, that's awesome, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I want to be respectful of your time. I mean, like I said, I have a million questions that I could keep on asking you, but I just want everybody to know. I know that in the emails you mentioned you've got things that are coming up, and maybe I think you mentioned like an online platform, and so I'm so intrigued for where things are going to go, and whatnot. But I'm hoping
everybody toward that resource list, Rachel. The 2 websites that give away a lot of free stuff, they're not mine. I voluntarily advise them, are on there. links that you can get a couple of the sets of everything are on there. And coming up, and it's going to be a couple years, but coming up, we're going to have much more online. And most researchers will send you their instructional materials if you just ask them.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was, sorry, Rebecca and Eric. I feel like I'm.
No, this is great.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
So excited to learn more, and we really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. I can't thank you and your participants enough. It's together we can make a difference.
And now my poor schools, because I've been on, this reading kick, I went into kind of a math kick, and now I'm just like, I'm going to be in their faces about their writing instruction.
I understand.
Hopefully they'll appreciate it in the long term. So
I understand.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Karen Harris. It was great. Good night.